They violated our rights, and we couldn't move where we want to, and we gonna march till hell freezes over.
The result of racism can be found in the housing policies across the U.S., which led to the 200-day marches in Milwaukee. This debate and grassroots diplomacy by Milwaukee's youth in the 1960s impacted the city, state, and country. Their diplomatic steps included taking the issue to the streets, which can still be seen in America today. In 1963, an advertisement paid for by the Milwaukee Board of Realtors was posted in the Milwaukee Journal, stating, quote, "Today, the rights and freedoms of an individual American property owner are being eroded. This endangers the rights and freedoms of all Americans. It is self-evident that the erosion of these freedoms will destroy the free, enterprising, individual American," end quote. This ad referred to the open housing movement, which started to take shape in the 1960s. The reasoning for this open housing movement is evident in the information released to the middle and upper class white Americans during this time. Some white Catholic priests in Milwaukee were against open housing as well. Father Russell Witten described open housing as not open, but forced.
If an individual is approached by some individual, regardless of color, race, or creed, they ought to have the right to refuse if they so desire.
In 1866, a Civil Rights Act was passed, stating that, quote, "Citizens of every race and color shall have the same right in every state and territory in the United States to inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey real and personal property." However, 100 years later, political loopholes and the moral beliefs of the white majority created racially biased housing policies, triggering housing discrimination protests in Milwaukee. Formed in 1947, the Youth Council embraced Father Grappi, a local priest, as their strategic ally. As it fought for justice, the NAACP Youth Council grew to be an organization embodying young people from all over Milwaukee, coming together to fight for equality. Realtors made the claim that property values would drop when African Americans moved into a neighborhood. Just the opposite came true. Data shows property rates rose 2 or 3 times its appraised value when sold to African Americans. They paid too much for their housing and were forbidden to move out of the Central Core. A national report in 1965 affirmed that 98% of Milwaukee's Black residents lived in the Central Core. This is a result of intentional government action. The declining of mortgages, white flight, and propaganda used by realtors all played a part in the discriminatory housing crisis in Milwaukee. Intending to pressure the city's Common Council, the Youth Council picketed the houses of multiple aldermen, which fell on deaf ears. On August 23, 1967, Grappi and the Youth Council announced their next diplomatic move, marching to the South Side. The Youth Council began marching on August 28, 1967. As the march made its way down the 16th Street Viaduct, also known as the Mason-Dixon Line of Milwaukee, 8,000 counter-protesters met them. In an attempt to reduce the uproar beforehand, the NAACP Youth Council informed white residents of the South Side they were marching, but the route was kept confidential. The peaceful protesters chanted and sang, but were met with violence, some even taking bricks to the head, many going home that night beaten and bloodied. This did not deter them. The Youth Council met nightly, debating strategy for the next day's march. Although it is now known as the 200-day march, a timeline had not been set. The choice of allowing young people to lead this movement offered new debate tactics and a diplomatic mindset.
Are we gonna die for our freedom? Yeah!
The intentions of these marches were to cast discrimination in a public spotlight, and to achieve this, the Youth Council marched every night with the intention of visibility. Many Youth Council members' greatest debate, however, was within their families. After losing her mother at the age of 3, Pamela Jo Sargent was raised by her grandmother, who saw firsthand the effects of violent, racist attacks in Arkansas.
She tried to stop me from going, but I used to climb out the window and run up the I lived on 6th and Clark, and St. Boniface was on 11th and Clark. And so I would go up to my room like I was going and do my homework and climb out the window and go up to the march.
The preachings of Father Grappi used the Bible to teach concepts such as justice, nonviolent disobedience, and redemptive suffering to the council. Difficult debates came from outside their meetings, and it took diplomatic steps from the youth in order for them to arrive at the march at all. Eventually, the debate on whether to march or not was won by the youth. In the end, older generations marched alongside their children.
They were protesting about the fact that they were Black Americans and they were not receiving their rights as Black Americans. They were not only studying history, they were making history, you see. And this was doing something psychologically to every Black child that participated in that demonstration. He was telling the world and he was telling himself that not everything is right in America.
April 4th, 1968. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated. April 5th, 1968. Cities all over the country break out in riots. With the Youth Council's leadership, Milwaukee marched peacefully. More than 15,000 people took to the streets, making it one of the biggest memorial protests in the nation.
The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice.
The 200-day marches are an example of the time it takes to create change and the diplomacy it takes to make that change. Within this movement and era, two legacies arose. The legacy of the diplomatic mission of youth marchers is seen today through the student protests of social justice issues. The legacy of housing discrimination, however, can still be seen through the segregation in Milwaukee today. Banks and realty companies were sued on the claims of redlining and discrimination. The impact that the Milwaukee NAACP Youth Council had on America is inescapable. This was the starting point for a fair housing ordinance passed in Milwaukee on December 12, 1967, 4 months before the Federal Fair Housing Act was passed on April 11, 1968. The legacy of the marches have never been as prominent as they are today. An activists group in Milwaukee, known as the People's Revolution, marched for 200 days straight, protesting the George Floyd shooting. This protest tactic was based solely on the marches of 1967 to 68. The 200-day marches, a diplomatic and peaceful movement, are a piece in the arc of the moral universe, and this arc continues to bend towards justice today.